ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment to continue with our Congress, and that's why we are going to resume with Julieta Sierra, who will continue with the importance of the usage of animal origin products in the feed industry. So we will give the floor to our next speaker to talk about her experience on the inclusion of these raw materials in the feeding of productive species. So again, a big applause for Julieta Sierra. Thanks again. If you allow me the presentation, please. Well, I will now talk from the perspective of nutriologist, which is what I am, of pork and poultry. And I will talk from our perspective in the nutrition side and why is important the quality of the origin, animal origin meals. But I will also talk about fats. There will be some concepts that you will see that are the same that we'll show. So it will be a little bit faster. First, we have to take into consideration some points, and is that poultry and pork are omnivorous as we are. So they consume meat, animal origin protein, and also vegetal origin protein. And ruminants, even though they are herbivorous, they have important capacity to use the sources of protein and the sources of fat of animal origin. Why? Well, because rumen is a chamber, fermentation chamber, that allows animals, ruminants specifically, to metabolize basically every material. And this is due to the microbial composition that they have in the rumen. And this allows as well to use both meals and animal origin fats, as long as we really take care of the balancing system of the diets that we use for these species. And obviously, this is something that is of the field of a nutritionist. The animal origin products, like the meals, for example, they are ingredients, all right? So remember that they are ingredients. They are not byproducts. They are not waste. They are an ingredient. The same way corn is, or rapeseed paste or soybean paste, which were considered at some point a waste, but today we know that there is a high homogeneity in what we look in the fabrication of these raw materials. So we also have standards to select the best criteria for the formulation of ingredients. So what advantages did we have with this animal origin product, with the raw materials, with the animal origin ingredients like fats and meals of animal origin? The advantages we have is that we can lower the cost of the feed and the cost of productions. And the quality that we have of these processed products will depend on the process that we use in these raw materials. I took this from Dr. Aburto, who presented a seminar in NARA. If you have access to that, I recommend you that you give it a look. You can request it to the NARA team. They are the ones who gave me the access to it. But it's important to observe how throughout time the costs have been changing on soybean paste. But something interesting is that once it goes up, it drops again, but never to the previous levels. And this is a sign that obviously it's being harder to buy the raw materials. And as a response, what happens in production is that the behavior of poultry, production-wise, it's going up. Actually, the cost of production of poultry associated with the higher cost of the feed. The advantage with this is that at the end of the day, the system of production of pork and bovine and poultry are higher, but the efficiency is lower. For example, in 1990, the conversion was around 2, and now it's 1.6. Also in pork, the feed conversion was around 2.9, and today is around 2.5, 2.6. So it's really important to consider this. The conversion rate is how many kilograms of weight, how many kilograms of feed an animal eats in order to gain 1 kilogram of weight. So if we say that the conversion rate is lower, the animals are more efficient. Even though the production costs are higher, the production will be more efficient. Now, I also got this from Dr. Aburto. This is a situation of ingredients of animal origin in Europe up to 2021. And we see here how animals were little by little accessing in Europe to products of meals of animal origin. Well, we have here a list of different animal origin products. There were a lot of restrictions due to the BPE, where we know that 95% of cases occur in England. They don't occur in the rest of the world. And what we see in the red bars is where we have the prohibitions and how little by little we had an increase throughout time. For example, here in 2021 and in 2017, it was already allowed the use of insects, gelatin, and collagenous for ruminants. The more restricted ones probably are the ruminants. But in poultry and pork in Europe, where they are very strict in this sense, now there is more openings for the uses of animal origin products. In the case of pet food, we can see that it's allowed basically every option. Now, what do we do as nutritionists, or what do we do in an integrated system in husbandry species? Well, it's important to determine the nutrients that we find in raw materials. We calculate through analysis. We have databases in order to design curves in which we can determine these levels, the NIR. The more data we have, more precision we will have as well. We also execute chemical analysis, fiber fractions, energy measures. We also use equations. We rely a lot on the manufacturers of synthetic amino acids or crystal amino acids. We also revise calcium, phosphorus, microminerals, heavy metals, and microbiologic. In general, we try that our raw materials meet some standards that are based on these analyses. All right. So what we know in husbandry species is that the raw materials of animal origin give us energy, protein, amino acids, calcium, and phosphorus, but we also need to consider the following: sustainability, the sustainability that they offer when they're used, because we are going through a process of recycling, the harmlessness that we need that these products have, both for humans and animals, and the market perception regarding this subject. And how does the process work in an integrated system? I'm gonna put it as easily as I can. We have a supply chain in which we have different levels of production. from the formulation up to the places where the animals eat in the farm. And there's a formula that I call the formula 0. That's the one the nutriologist creates on paper. And going from there, starting from there, we have the formula 1, which is the one that the quality office receives. And they say, okay, so I have to put these ingredients, it's already revised, so let's go to the next part, which is the supplier. And then in that space, they have a different formula because they have different interests. I'm not saying that's bad. We just have to understand the thinking process of each area and the priorities that each area has. There's another formula that it's done in the manufacturing, in the feed manufacturing, because in there they're interested in the stocking process, the useful life of the stock products, the mix system, etc. You also have the subject of transportation to the farms, because in those cases we will also have some variations. Then I have the silage in the farms, and then I have the places where the animals eat, which probably will have a different formula from the formula 0. And what is it that we're looking for with this? Well, as I said, each area has different priorities, and my formula 0, which is the one I designed as a nutritionist, what tries to do is to cover the nutrition requirements without trying to exceed the waste, guarantee the efficiency of the diet, obtaining better results with lower cost of the ration, and we also want the ingredients to be homogeneous and that they are also safe. So when it gets to the quality department, they take care of revising the raw materials to avoid contamination, exchange agents, traceability, the presence of microorganisms that meets the nutrition profiles required by the nutritionist, the guarantee of digestibility, homogeneity, and the safety of the products. What about sellings? Well, they prioritize the prices. They have a target of low prices. However, they are guided by the framework of nutrition, formula, and quality. Of course, they have to take a look to the cost of the business. So what happens in the feed factory? What they take care of there is the useful life of the raw materials, the freshness, the fluency, the smell, an easy mix, the safeness, the safety for animals and humans. What do we look in the transportation system? Well, the same thing. Transportation says, okay, I have to deliver the feed, but in the process of delivery, I have a subject of production, because the truck moves and you start changing a little bit it gets a little bit floury, right? So you get that process in the base of the bag, and this can represent waste and diminishment in the quality of the product. So you have to take care in the transportation process that water doesn't leak inside, or there's no presence of smells, and the safety for the operators. What about the places where they eat? Well, here we talk about the dust. Oh, I skipped one. But okay. Don't worry, at the end of the day, it's similar. So when we take care here in an important way is that there is no contamination, inside of the silage, because they deliver the feed, and when they do that, if there is no pre-cleaning process, we can have a contamination due to microtoxins, bacteria, and this obviously represents a problem at the production level. So what we look for here is that we have safety in this process as well.
I hope animals can eat. Similarly, in the feeding grounds, no humidity, losses, odors, and the consumption parameters are consumption, gain, and food efficiency. I look for a homogeneous response at the productive level, and also that the food is innocuous. So if you see, we have a common denominator in everywhere, which is homogeneity and innocuity. And how do we get to homogeneity? We have to classify raw materials since the origin. We have to develop the providers. And here come the meat or fatty meals. We need to know the raw materials production. We need to know the storage and management systems, the ones that make the meat meals or the ones who deliver the products traded to us, to know about good practices from the provider, because they can produce or be a broker, but they must have good manufacture practices. We have to consider that the provider is not someone who wants to see us face to face. We aren't clients. The provider is our trading partner. I always say my success in the sector is the success of my clients. For me to prevail in the market, my clients have to prevail. So I have to deliver a quality service to the clients so they can prevail in the market. It's the same I say here. The success of livestock and balanced food is the success of the provider. So we care for both sides of the business. We can't have clients who don't pay us. We can't have providers who don't deliver what we request. And this is a continuous enhancement process to assure quality. We are in a confidence relationship. That's a criteria to develop a provider. And as nutritionists, we need part of the makers or traders of animal products to have a gain-gain relationship. So we also need to develop standardized processes, and they all must be associated to all other processes involved in productions, the ones we saw, since nutrition until they get to the farms, the animals. So we have to now talk about, we talked about homogeneity, now innocuity. Innocuity is simply the inability to cause damage, everything that causes no damage. So in this case, we talk about everything that doesn't damage people, animals. We have laws and control to assure the food, the medicines won't cause problems to health. We also know we must follow the sanitary and hygiene conditions established by the authorities, and this will take us to an innocuity criteria, because we also assure this during a process. We talked about the process of nutrition, but also the process of meat, meal production, and good management. And not only the ingredients of the product are involved, it's everything. We've seen this before, but the quality is sustained, and the timing of the process and the way we manage it. to obtain fat and to make meat meals. And this has a relationship with the bacteria in the raw materials and in the food. And what we observed is that the pure inorganic acids used from long time ago allow for food conservation as their bactericide and fungicide effects. That's not something new. We know this. I mentioned this a while ago. Problem with the pure organic acids is that they're very corrosive. So what have we done? We used acid salts, which are a reaction between an acid and a base to reduce reactions and side effects and corrosion, evaporation, and damage to people and animals by their presentation. So we mix salt and an acid, and this mix brings 70% of the anion acid and 30% will be a salt. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean it's the activity of the neonacid, that 73% activity, because as we mentioned, it's a very inefficient process, this transformation, compared with an inorganic acid in its pure form. This chart we saw already. I'm just adding the difference between salts. You can see the effect of different doses of acids in their pure form compared to an acid salt. We see 1 kilo per ton, 3 kilos, and 5 kilos per ton of propionic acids, and its effect. I'm not talking about we need 5 kilos to get this effect, and with the pure acid we can achieve the same effect with 1 kilo per ton, but they are very corrosive and have the factors we've mentioned. What happens when I convert formic acid into a salt? Here's sodic or ammonic formiate. See how aggressively they reduce their efficiency, and definitely sodic formiate is good for nothing. So ammonia formiate is low efficiency and transformed into a salt. It requires high doses for a response, and acetic acid we saw in the last talk has a relatively low efficiency to control salmonella. We also used formaldehydes used in grains, as in meals. And what happens with the formaldehyde? It's very effective. It allows for conservation of food, but it's short-term conservation. The provider says the residual effect in the products is only 21 days. This is carcinogenous for animals and people. It depresses the immune system. It changes the intestine microbiome, and it's forbidden as an additive in animal food, they have all these bad factors. So there are some places where we use it, and there are countries that still approve it for some specific cases. It's disappearing, and it's also important to consider this can be harmful for the operators. We have seen this. There are problems associated to organic acids in their pure form, and also the issue of transportation, which is a risk. The proposal is focused in the use of lignosulfonic acid associated with formic acid to control salmonella in meals with the same properties we've seen. And here I want to mention specifically there is something that's worth mentioning, that in the end of the day, what we see is that propionic acid in its pure form requires a very high doses for a good response. And when we associate lignosulfonic acid with formic acid to control salmonella, we see the response is much better with lower doses. So this is important to consider. Now, the lignosulfonic acid has super interesting properties, has an effect to control diabetes. It's been used in studies to observe the reduction of the intestine absorption of glucoses. It's not only for that, it has effects associated to reduce the HIV effects, influenza, coronavirus, porcine epidemic diarrhea. So there are viruses that are important to consider as an alternative. I'm not saying that what I show you will solve the problem. There are other factors, but it's important to consider that the lignosulfonic acid also has these properties, and that's one of the reasons why it's approved by FDA. This is a sensitive trial done in Mexico, in vitro. We had a sample of mixed with lignosulfonic, and what we observe is that the pH maintained for 24 hours is the association of lignosulfonic with formic, and the minimum bacteria concentration needed to eliminate salmonella was of 2.5 kilos against 4.5 kilos for the product considered one of the market leaders. So how does the bacteria side effect of this mixture behave? The residue presented (15% and 30% formaldehyde), and this chart is incomplete, sorry. There was a chart where I hadn't seen it. What we see is the doses, kilos by ton, 24 hours, 7 days, 30 days. What we see is that the ability to control with lower doses the amount of salmonella is much more effective in time with the use of the association of lignosulfonic and formic acids compared with formaldehyde. So it has a smaller lifetime. And this is just to compare a pure formic acid and residue with lignosulfonic acid associated to formic acid. What we see is that 2 kilo doses, what we are obtaining is the same response in what refers to the colony formation units without adverse effects of the pure form of acid. So as a final message, the important thing for us in the livestock sector is homogeneity, innocuity, and to get homogeneity, we need the producers of animal products to consider all factors, including microbiology. Innocuity, that food is healthy, that causes no effect to animals and people. Biosafety is the viral theme, which is a delicate issue for us. If here in Mexico, if we have African disease, this detail is important when we think about animal meals conservation, having to do not only with the food, but also preservation, conservation, food and raw materials, and enhancement in nutrition qualities of the ingredients. As we mentioned, it's about the enhancement by digestibility as well as the other nutrition factors we have in the food. This obviously brings high quality to the products. I won't mention any figures and amounts. You have all that in manuals. There is no information I can bring you that you can't find easily in a web page, because what is important for us is to transmit what is needed at the practical level to have success in the use of animal products. Thank you.